I'll just say in relation to some of the scenes that we've seen out of Adelaide and elsewhere, where people are now protesting against those who are gathering peacefully to either argue no in this case or argue yes. We live in a free country. We treasure our democracy. It's absolutely sacrosanct to our way of life, and I don't tolerate for 1 minute Australians being abused by other Australians in those sorts of rallies. If you have something to say in our country, in any debate, in any political forum, you say it in a peaceful way. We shouldn't be surprised, though, because the Prime Minister has set our country up to be divided. He's been warned for months and months and months that he was embarking on a path right up to October 14 and likely beyond, which is splitting our country in two. We said to the Prime Minister that he should not proceed with this referendum because Australians haven't got the detail that they require to make an informed judgment. And I think that's why Australians are angry at the Prime Minister at the moment, because they're being asked to vote on something that won't be designed until after the election takes place. I mean, what sort of Prime Minister says to the Australian public, I'll explain to you what it is you're voting for after you vote? There's a 6-month consultation and design process after October 14. Why couldn't that have been done over the course of the last 6 months so that people knew what they were voting for? And I think the Prime Minister is putting the country in a very precarious position at the moment, both economically and in terms of the way in which he's dividing the country. If the question being put to the Australian public at the moment was, do you support recognition of Indigenous Australians in our Constitution, there would be 70 or 80% support for it. But he's taken a deliberate decision not to do that. And I think a lot of Australians are starting to understand that this Prime Minister is either all talk and no action, or when he does act, he acts to divide the country and to drive up power prices and drive up inflation. And that's something that the coalition will fight against, and all the way up to the next election, until we win the next election. We're going to be working hard to stop the bad decisions of the government and to get our country back on track after the election in 2025. I'm happy to take any questions. Yes, mate.
There's an anti-voice rally this weekend in Sydney, organised by a pro-Putin conspiracy theorist. Would you discourage people from attending?
Well, look, I'd condemn that protest action that we saw in Adelaide in the strongest possible terms. I really would. I think it's an abomination that people would be inspired by Vladimir Putin to start with. I think it's appalling that people would gather to call other Australians the names and to threaten people as they did. But again, we shouldn't be surprised, because the Prime Minister has created a dynamic in Australia at the moment, pitching one Australian against the other. The family discussions that are taking place at the moment, where people are either strongly for or strongly against. The Prime Minister has set our country up to fail on October 14, and Indigenous leaders, I think, are increasingly becoming frustrated at a Prime Minister who won't give the detail. So we're operating in a vacuum at the moment, where we know that the words are so broad, so liberal, as to be open up to interpretation in the High Court that will cover every aspect of government policy, and all of those consequences, intended and unintended, are going to have a negative impact on the way our country operates if there's a yes vote at the next election. So I have the utmost respect for people who have made a judgment that they want to vote yes, but my very strong advocacy is that people vote no, because it's unknown, it's certainly divisive, it's going to be permanent, and it's not going to provide the practical outcomes that we all want for people living in Indigenous communities, in remote communities, particularly places like Alice Springs.